What's up, everybody? Just want to take a quick second and let people know that I am self-supported. I now put all of my episodes on Substack for paid subscribers. I put them up early, and then 24 hours later, I release them to the public on all my platforms. I also have Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, Buy Me a Coffee, Zelle, a P.O. Box, and Locals, Patreon. And all of these, all of the links are in the show notes of every single episode I put out. So look forward to continuing to, provide great conversations. And thank you all for your continued support. Matt, when's the last time we did a solo episode? I actually think it's been a little while, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think I did one with Kevork and a couple with Michael Young.
Yeah, so it's probably been 2 or 3 months since we did a solo one.
Yeah, I don't know, but I mean, yeah, nothing's been happening. I mean, the Pope died, market's crashing, gold's up 3%.
But other than that, everything's fine. Everything's fine.
Otherwise, another dull Monday.
Yeah, the market was down almost 1,000 points again today.
Yeah, I go by percentages. That I wish they would not focus on like it's down 1,000. It's like, what's the percent? That's what counts.
Yeah, I had Lawrence Lepard. I keep pronouncing his last. You assume it's Leopard, but Lawrence Lepard was on my podcast earlier today, and we were talking about just financials, and he was referencing how he pays more attention to the S&P, and if it falls below 5,100, that's kind of like the danger zone to where he feels like maybe the administration is forcing Powell to drop rates because Powell is adamant that he doesn't want to drop rates right now, and that they're boxing him in to where he's going to have to drop them.
Well, when folks look at key numbers like gold going past 3,000 then 3,400, or silver is like hovering around 3,300. What they're really talking about are psychological points, which is like, in a sense, being really crude about it. It's like technical analysis, chartists versus fundamental analysis, and so if you're looking at the psychology of it, then these numbers, the round numbers, have a lot of meaning. Because people get on the other side of it, and there will be like a stampede effect. But yeah, in terms of percentages, today was a good day. I mean, a significant day. Markets down, gold up, silver flat. It's a lot of ways you can read the tea leaves, fundamentally or technically, or.
Well, it's something just doesn't seem right, and like which we've you and I have now had numerous conversations both online and in messaging, and one of the things that Lawrence and I were talking about towards the end, I said, people think from the boomer standpoint. Now, let me not all boomers, but you've got this kind of boomer mentality to where they think that the Fox News watchers, the system is bad right now, but it's going to all correct itself. And, I've never agreed with that. I mean, one, I think you have to change with the times and adapt or die. And I was quoting one of my favorite movies, Moneyball. But,
Yeah.
I think that, they just, a lot of them just don't get it, in my view.
I mean, I'm sorry, expand on that.
The boomer standpoint, to where like they think that the system is just going to course correct and it's going to fix everything. It's bad now, we're in a downturn, but eventually the system will, it'll come back around till it'll be good again. And I don't think the system is salvageable.
Yeah, I wrote a Substack yesterday called "Baby Boomers Better Beware," about the like intergenerational anger that's being built up. But as far as like, trust the plan, that's like going back to QAnon, right? Trust the plan, just stick with it. It's going to self-correct. I'm more of a fourth turning guy. I think we're I think we're like at a point where we're like looking at a pivot through like grand super cycles, which will get us into like the whole like decoupling from China, really, really major issues, not just technical or fundamental analysis of charts today. I think we're in the middle of a huge decoupling, and it's going to be determined in the next 4 or 5 years. World war. We may we may be gearing up for a world war that's completely unavoidable, like in the 1930s. There's I don't care what diplomats, who on any side, what was building up from World War One through the 30s to World War Two, it was going to happen. It's like a pressure cooker. It's going to happen, and we may be building up to something like that. Now, in the 1930s, they had battleships and airplanes. They did not have nuclear weapons. So you can't always say everything's going to be parallel. Like this will be just like what happened in, this century or that century, because they didn't have nuclear weapons. They couldn't just end it all. The same kind of mistakes that were made centuries ago, the same parallel kind of thinking and the same trend towards a big mistake could lead to a nuclear disaster, uh, whether or not 100 nuclear bombs fly or thousands. If all of our grids go down, then all of our nuclear power plants are going to run away like Chernobyl and Fukushima. So it's quite different to say, oh, this is going to be just like the 1930s or just like pre this war or pre that war. They didn't have a potential to just like end humanity with a nuclear mistake, which so that's completely new. But I think that we're in the middle of a real turning, like the fourth turning kind of thing. But we're in the middle of cycles, and maybe we get our bearings again. Maybe we get back on an even keel. But I think we're going to see some stuff that's like bigger on the level or bigger than French Revolution, Bolshevik Revolution, Great Depression, World War II. Of course, a lot of people just say, Matt Bracken, he's like the perennial black pill, that, you know, you're just you're just always predicting doom and gloom, Mr. Doom and Gloom. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm completely wrong. I don't want my, you know, I don't want young people to grow up into the middle of a, terrible era like that, but I think we're gearing up for some bad stuff. But maybe that's just me.
No, it's not. And people say this. I haven't been around doing this as long as you have, so you have a bigger audience than I do. But people will label me the same way, and how can you not look at this and see? I mean, but I never thought, even after the election, I wasn't buying into all that. People, Maha and this and that, and it's like now Maha, Big Pharma's not going anywhere. They're not like that is not
I'm sorry, who's not going
Big
anywhere?
Pharma. Big Pharma
Oh,
is
Big
not
Pharma.
going anywhere. Um, you know, all of
And
this.
that's with RFK. RFK is in, but we're kind of also into like a trust the plan thing. Like uh, Cash Patel and Dan Bongino and Pam Bondi, they're like getting ready for the big attack, but they've got to get all their ducks in a row and line it all up so it'll be, irrefutable. So we're sort of back in that old
It's coming.
GOP
It's
trust the
coming. It's
plan.
coming. It's
Trust the
coming.
plan.
They haven't been there long
Patient,
enough.
yeah, be patient. They've got to really get it lined up. They've got less than 2 years because in 2 years the Congress will flip probably and or possibly. And even before that, a lot of the GOP people will start hedging their bets even more than they are now. So they'll be even more cautious. Yeah, that I'm hoping that Trump can decouple from China, onshore our industry, which will take years and years. It's it's sort of uh, is he the master of 4D chess? He's just like can't tell us. If he was going to, if he really understood this, I think he'd have to come out and say, look, we're gonna have to take like a serious dose of pain because onshoring is not going to be easy. We don't have the factory workers anymore. The factories are long gone. Generations of technology have happened since they all went to China. But we cannot be a strong country if we're depending on China for our medicine, for our gadgets, our clothes, for our steel. We have to decouple so that America can depend on itself in the case of like some kind of an international disruption. But to get from where we are now to that decoupling is going to require an enormous amount of pain. And politicians never like to sell pain. They like to sell, the golden era is coming. But that sets up a false hope. If the golden era is not coming, maybe it's coming in 10 years or 20 years. But I mean, look at comparing to Russia. I know there's not exact parallels, but Soviet Union collapses. The 1990s are horrible in Russia. Okay, they they were under attack by the Western billionaire oligarchs trying to cut up Russia to sell off the pieces, like a merger and acquisition pirate raid. Just we're going to just disassemble Russia and own the pieces. Russia came back from that because they had the right leader at the right time who was still there, Putin. And Russia now is self-sufficient, essentially. You can say, oh, like, the price of oil is down, they're going to fail. No, they're not. They're a self-sufficient country now. They went from the USSR through the 90s into the 2000s as wreckage trying to reassemble itself. And now they are more independent and self-sufficient. They probably have the best military on the planet, battle tested. I don't think that you can sell that program to America. It happened to Russia. It wasn't voluntary, right? The USSR collapsed. They were in free fall. Yeltsin to Putin. Trump cannot go on television and say, we're going to have to do something kind of like Russia. We're going to have to go through 10 years of like really hard times, and we'll have a lower standard of living for that decade. But like Russia, on the other side of that decade, in the 2030s, we'll be better off for it. No American politician can sell that plan. The politicians only sell happy days are here again, golden era.
You would need a scenario too where you would need the leader to stay in place for, I don't know, 2 terms, if not more, in order to implement something
Right.
like that. And
Or Trump Vance maybe, Trump Vance possibly.
possibly. I
But
mean,
but there's
oh, go ahead.
but there's so many more wild cards. China's building these floating pier things, these jack-up piers to like basically invade Taiwan. We're still posturing with Iran, with the carrier battle groups and the bombers on Diego Garcia. It seems like for the time being, Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, and Vance put off like Netanyahu's let's bomb Iran. So which is a positive step. But I mean, in many ways it's similar to the 1930s in terms of China. We're now not sanctioning, but tariffing China, kind of like putting the pressure on Japan. We thought we'll cut Japan off from its raw materials, stop them getting oil, and they'll knuckle under. They didn't. They attacked Pearl Harbor. And Chairman Z, he's not knuckling under. So Trump and Z are playing like, knuckleball, hardball right here in terms of the tariffs. And Z's not backing off, and he's not knuckling under. I really enjoyed the Martin Armstrong. Gosh, everybody should watch your Martin Armstrong interview from a couple days ago, because he really gets it. In my perception, Martin Armstrong really gets it. China is about face. His explanation, are they communist or are they not communist? No, they're not communist in their economy, but if they came out and said, like the Russians, we're done with communism, the Russians can do that. They can do that kind of a pivot. We're still a Christian Orthodox nation. Communism was a mistake. The Russia of the, our red, white, blue flag, it's back. China can't do that because if they take down the giant pictures of Mao on Red Square, then they're admitting that, like, a half of a century of their history was a mistake. So the Oriental mind can't grasp that because it's such a loss of face. So Trump, the New York Queens guy, hardball real estate dealer, smash mouth real estate dealer, is exactly the wrong guy to be negotiating with Chairman Xi, because he doesn't understand that for the Chinese, knuckling under at this point is a humiliation ritual they will not go through. They will go to war before they appear to bow to Trump. They will not do it, no matter what, because saving face is like so crucial to their social psychology. So we have all of these forces like tectonic plates that are moving, and the tectonic plates have like their own logic. China's not going to move on this. They will not. Trump's not going to move on this. You have all of these forces in play, and I don't think anybody can just stand up and say, look, I think you're making a small mistake here. Let's steer this way. I think these tectonic plates are going to lead to some ruptures. And, who knows where it's all going to break out. But I would expect some, serious social and economic earthquakes out of all of this.
Well, I think we're seeing the economic earthquakes start now, and that was the other thing that I keep referencing my conversation with goes by Larry. One of the posts I saw on X was from Craig Fuller on FreightWaves. You follow him?
No,
FreightWaves, supply chain logistics. So Sal obviously does the shipping, Sal Mercogliano, and then Craig Fuller has his with the terms of the trucking. And but he wrote a post, I think it was yesterday, talking about he goes, I'm paraphrasing, but I voted for the Trump administration, but it wasn't for them to nuclear bomb the supply chain logistics within his first 100 days at office. Let me see if I can find it really quick and I can read it. So you're seeing the impact right now on the supply chain from these tariffs, and so I'm looking it up really quick.
It's the uncertainty. People can't make a plan because from day to day they don't know if some things are going to be 10% up or 20% down in terms of major external factors like tariffs. So you're kind of like shocking and freezing the system.
This episode is brought to you by Vaulted. Launched by McIlvaney Financial Group, with Vaulted, I literally just tap a button and I own physical gold stored in a professional vault. Vaulted is offering all of my listeners $50 of free gold when you click on my sign-up link. They have a tool called Vault Plan that allows you to passively add your gold position every month. Just activate it for 6 months and you will get $50 of free gold in your account. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to vaulted.blbvux.net/coffeeandamike.
Which is what we saw in the markets today.
He wrote yesterday, I enthusiastically supported Trump's victory in the November election. I thought I was voting for pro-business policies and small, targeted, and incremental tariffs that would encourage the production of strategic industries to return to the Americas, i.e., what we got in the first administration. I did not vote for a neutron bomb to wipe out supply chains and small businesses 100 days in.
Yeah, I mean, if you can say Trump is applying shock therapy, like we're going to nuke our own self. So instead of external forces demolishing the USSR and forcing the USSR to reorganize into today's Russia, we're going to nuke ourselves and you know get to the same reorganization. I who knows how it's going to work out, but in the medium term before that, I'm worried about open war with China. I mean, we're basically dislocating, or we're basically disconnecting from China. What the total tariff on China is like over 200%. They're not going to be ships coming from China next month. They're going to stop. And
No.
and we're not China's only market. And China is at the point where they have their own internal consumer market. You know, China's at a takeoff point similar to America in the 20th century. Tariffs were fantastic for America in the 19th century when we were a growing new emerging power with all of the resources inside. We didn't need to import cotton like Britain had to import cotton. We didn't need to import anything, literally nothing. What do we need? Like buy some lace, buy some porcelain, who cares? We could build our own locomotives. We could build everything. And this lasted, into the 20th century. And then America became its own massive consumer market. We could just sell to Americans. We were making Fords and we were selling them to Americans. We were not selling Fords to the French or the Japanese. Henry Ford made Fords and we sold them to Americans. This is where China is now at a takeoff point. We think we can still close the door on China. If we cut China off from the America market, they're going to go into depression, and then they're going to cry uncle and say, Uncle Sam, Donald Trump, what do we have to do to get back into your market? I think that window is already closed. Number one, because of what Martin Armstrong was saying, for the social reasons of saving face, they're not going to knuckle under, period. And they already have, 1 billion people that they may have a shitty factory job, with suicide nets in some cases, but they have enough pocket money to start buying their own products. This becomes an internal engine that's not relying on just selling to America. And America is not China's only market. I mean, we're like, what, a quarter or a third of their market? The rest of the world is taking China's products, and they're not going to just stop buying them. And at this point, China is starting to make decent, like things like cars at a much cheaper price than Japan or Germany or America can make, and is going to start exporting them to Africa and the third world. I mean, Chairman Xi today, he was like over, like he's like doing a swing through like Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia. They're knitting together Asia as an economic market. What America does to them is less and less important. It's not like the deal breaker that Trump thinks it is. If we put these tariffs on China, they're going to have to surrender. They're not going to surrender. And they may become stronger and stronger. And this is, I think the only other person that talks about this is maybe Bannon sometimes. There's roughly two huge major schools of thought about, how does the world run itself? This is all from like the beginning of the 20th century, but the British historian Mackinder has the world island economic concept, that if Eurasia and that Eurasian landmass ever becomes a complete self-sustaining internal market trading to itself, it won't matter what America, Australia, England, we won't even matter. And the other one is Mahan and the sea power strategy, that Oceania, right, everything except the world island, we can just continue to disrupt and divide Eurasia, make sure that Germany and Russia and China are never united as a economic bloc. That's the Crimean War with the British. It's like, let's go in there and attack Russia through the soft underbelly. Crimea, we're talking century, 150, almost 200 years ago. And now we're in the position of Britain trying to keep that economic bloc from emerging. And if it does become one whole giant economic bloc, they have certain advantages that'll be very hard to overcome because internal landlines of communication are much cheaper even than shipping. If you have a train that's going from Holland to Shanghai, that's the cheapest way of doing anything. Internal pipelines for gas, for refined fuel, it's very efficient and very cheap. So Britain, America, the Five Eyes, we're like in the position of trying to stop that. And it's other people compare it to what the so-called Thucydides trap, when an empire is declining and another empire is emerging. It's a time of great risk of a major war because, for example, now the American empire sees the sun is setting, and that if we don't do something now, China will only be stronger relative to us in 10 or 20 years. So it's better to risk a war now to try to disrupt the emerging empire. Well, that's a great recipe for war, and I hope we can avoid it. But we're definitely in a major turning point in history. This is not just hold on and things will work out all right.
I never read Neil Howe's book. Did you?
Yeah, Fourth Turning. Sure, and there's others. I mean, he's not the only one, but I mean that's like the shorthand for these changing cycles. There was a Russian, what's his name, the Kondratiev cycle. It's basically, and he wrote that before even the Great Depression. It's based on, it's like an 80-year cycle when you go through a period in markets where everything gets looser and looser. People take wilder and wilder chances, on options, and then when you have a market crash, that generation becomes very conservative, and then they teach, don't ever do this. When you do these take these wild chances, it'll always result in a crash. So don't do these things. Be very conservative. Well, it takes 80 years for that knowledge to be completely erased. Nobody remembers the last Great Depression, and everybody's back into a go-go, wild. Let's take chances. Let's do crazy all kind of derivative contracts, whatever. And then there's another crash, and things become conservative again. We're definitely in that period. I mean, it's our liabilities are just, I don't think they can ever be repaid, and the debt to GDP, by all these measures, we're like heading for Niagara Falls.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any more rabbits to pull out of the hat to save this.
and the disconnect too, I think, between people. And, kind of coming back to what you wrote about in Substack, is a baby boomer, a stupid question by me. Baby boomer is the same as a boomer, right? It's the same thing?
Right. It's a 1946 to
64?
like early 60s.
So that would be my
depending
parents'
on how you measure it, but
my parents' age.
Yeah, and this is, there's a saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. So if you were born in that era, you were like, you grew up in a time of rising tides. Everybody, all of the war factories of World War II were turned into consumer factories. And like China today, it was a period when Americans were getting their first washing machine, their first refrigerator. That before World War II, people didn't have refrigerators. You bought canned goods, or you bought, at the local not even supermarket. the local store, you bought what you're going to eat that day, or maybe an iceman brought a block of ice, right, which was carved from some lake somewhere and shipped on trains. But the idea of like I can freeze some Swanson dinners. Nobody had that concept until after World War II. So you have 150 million Americans all buying their first washing machine, their first refrigerator, getting their first automobile, and that was a huge takeoff point. Well, that's the baby boomer generation grew up thinking things will always just get better and better and better, and that generation, was able to buy houses for $40,000 that are now worth $1 million. It's like a kind of a cliche, but people that can't afford rent today look at that and there's some built up, pent up anger. The baby boomers didn't do anything to like deserve the anger. They're just, they came in riding that wave. They caught a great wave.
But
what do you expect them to do? What do you expect them to do? Like,
But I also think though, in regards to that, maybe because I'm in that middle state, I'm in that in between, and being a millennial, so I'm in between the boomers and then the Gen Zs, and or wait, am I a millennial? I'm a millennial, right?
Gen X.
I'm a Gen X.
There's
I always
Gen
get
X,
that
then
wrong. I'm a Gen X.
Gen X.
What's millennials right underneath me then?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Disclaimer: I was wrong. I'm a Gen X, not a millennial. But I always get that wrong.
The names are such cliches, but it might be easier just to say like, the age generation or the when you were born.
Well, I'll be 47 next month. So
Right.
my father would have been 75. My mother will be 73. So I try to, as best I can, like when I'm at the gym or if I'm at yoga or getting coffee, the younger people, I like make it a point to talk to them. And, like younger people today, they don't want to go to college, right? I mean, I was talking to a guy last week at the gym. He's 20 years old. He just dropped out. He's like, I didn't see the point.
Why would they want to go to college? I think that Matt Smith and Maxim Smith, like with their program for education outside of college, I think they're onto something for sure. And Trump is in office, so I'm more likely to say, okay, the military is a good option now. All during the Biden years, I was saying, do not join the military. If you have that kind of if you're a male with that kind of stamina and guts that you would have wanted to be like some kind of military spec ops guy, I would always say become a lineman. Take one of these courses, some of which are paid for by the power companies. The guys that go up in the cherry picker bucket trucks and fix power lines during storms, they are making six figures after a couple of years. and I mean and that's a real skill, not like let's go to a foreign country and snipe somebody in sandals, right?
Well, and this kid said to me, because I was telling him about my conversation with Matt and about the college experience, because I still hear that with friends of mine that have kids their age, they're in high school that are sending up, I want my kid to have the college experience, and I'm like, what does that even mean? And this was a young guy said that to me. He goes, people said that to me. I don't even know what that means. What, go get drunk?
No, the college of even like into the 2000s is not, today college is a different thing. Number one, it's like 60% females. The faculty is completely female dominated. The men that are in the faculty are cucks that are so timid, they just, during any kind of a faculty meeting, they won't make a peep because they'll be attacked. So college right now is a liberal globalist brainwashing factory. So,
and it'll cost you. My alma mater, Kent State, I think it was, I don't know, maybe 10,000 living in the dorm my freshman year, something like that. It's 30,000 now.
Yeah, going into debt to get a degree there's much. I think that the whole Matt and Maxim Smith preparation thing is so much smarter. And if you just, Maxim is doing things, a wide range of things. Um, but if you just were going to focus on one, I would say something like power company linemen, because they can't outsource that. A lot of welding can be done by robotics in the near future, right? A lot of the skills will be done by either robots or some guy in a call center or an AI application. But the guys that go up to fix power lines, they got to have their hands right on it, and it pays well. And if you're a young guy and you have a lot of physical qualities and mental qualities that you'd like to test yourself, I highly recommend that kind of a path. Not only that, I mean, it can be a lot of different skills, but it has to be something that can't be outsourced and can't be handed over to AI. Anything that's done on a computer screen is going to be an AI job very soon. So you've
What?
got to look for a skill that requires a human going out in a vehicle and figuring out what tools to use.
Why do you think there's such a disconnect between the boomers and the zoomers? And can it be repaired?
Well, I'm a conservative boomer, right? I mean, I voted for Ronald Reagan my first go around. So there's like a perception that boomers are basically liberal because they see like, oh, those were the hippies of the 60s. The boomers became the liberals that ran the colleges, and they got the great house and they paid off their mortgage, and now they want to hang on to everything forever. They don't care about their grandchildren. I think that's, an almost insulting perception, but I get it. I mean, if the perception is there, perception is reality. People do things based on their perceptions. So I get it that there's this anger against people born, say, before 1960, that seem to like have gotten the best of everything. But there's always a wave that comes in. Some people benefit just by the timing of when they're born, and the boomers did. But to me, it's not a reason to just like hate on a generation. I get it. But if you're struggling to pay rent and you're priced out of the housing market, you've got to now work two shitty jobs just to pay rent. I can understand the anger. I mean, I definitely can. I mean, I wish there were ways for people to disconnect from that, but you know, we're on the backside of a wave. The boomers caught a wave that they could hang 10 and shoot the curl and ride into the beach and get all the chicks and everything's great. And then another generation comes in and it's like the backwash, and you're in the soup and you're getting slammed down on the coral. You shouldn't blame the surfers that just happened to luckily catch the wave before you, right? I mean, it's some of it's just a matter of timing, where the you know um, when the you happen to be born, dropped into the world. But no matter what your age is, whether I just turned 68, whether you're 18 or 68, we're all dealing in the 2025 reality. So it's sort of a waste of time to try to say I'm blaming those guys because they caught this great wave. Well, they didn't set up the wave to catch it. They were just there when that wave came in, and maybe you dropped in when the wave was going out. The tide was going out, but it's kind of stupid to just blame the generation you're born in. We're all in 2025 now.
Yeah, but you've adapted and pay close attention to what's going on to where you're not sitting watching Fox News every night and getting your information just solely from one source. And I'm going to go back to what Dave Collum told me a long time ago, and I've referenced this. If you,
Column,
yeah, Dave Collum.
column.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
if you're somebody who
I just want
casually,
to, I just want to, because you said that quick, like, and it sounded like Dave Collin. but people should know who Dave Collum is.
Yeah, we still got to
And
do that
go back and
conversation.
go back and watch the Coffee and Mikes with him.
We still got to do that one too with you and
Yeah,
Dave. But
and Kunstler. The conversations with those guys are amazing.
so funny, those two going back. I don't even have to do anything.
Yes,
I just turn the recorder on and just sit there and just enjoy the show.
100%.
But David said, if you're one of those people that just casually, watch Fox News or whatever CNN, you cannot keep up with what's going on. It's impossible.
And that's most people. And most people, if they get any news at all, it's like flipping channels between sitcoms or, you know, on their phone doing TikToks and then maybe hearing a TikTok of some politician. And they're getting their perceptions based on that. But the people that are, those of us who are trying to be fully cognizant, we understand that a lot of the herd is, being run based on psyops, and we can't change that. We can't, as individuals, we can't put out some kind of a message to the herd that that they're going the wrong direction. All we can do is sort of float a little bit above the herd with our knowledge, understand why is the herd running in that direction, or these sub-herds, where are they going, what's the result going to be, and how do I position myself so that I'm not stampeded off a cliff with the herd, right? Or if I'm not trampled by the herd. If the herd is going in a very self-destructive direction, how do I bail out and get somewhere else? Like people we know in like Uruguay and Argentina, they definitely don't plan to be stampeded off the herd, off the cliff with the herd. They've seen this and they've made other decisions. Or just within the United States, because I don't think that if the United States totally falls, I think the whole world will go into a very dark period. But a lot of what we can do is move to a corner of the USA that's going to probably endure better than others. I mean, there's some terrain in the United States that's just guaranteed to fail.
I'm in the worst, and I'm in the worst, one of the worst places
Well,
you
no,
could be.
no, you don't want to be in like lower Manhattan when the power goes out, right?
Or Arizona.
Yeah, that would be tough. And because you might be, if the power goes out in Arizona and the water stops, it's going to be a world of hurt, especially in the summer.
People in this city was never designed, Las Vegas too, was never designed to have this many millions of people living in it. And
No.
something will happen here at some point. Now, it might not be in my lifetime, but something is going to happen.
Yeah, it's essentially a space colony with a glass bubble over it. And I use this analogy all the time. The people on Mars, in the terraformed city on Mars, where the temperature is great and the humidity is great, they look out through the glass dome and they see the stars and they think this is a sustainable, permanent city. No, it's not. If the plug is pulled on Arizona, there's no way. I mean, when you think 100 years ago, stagecoach time, or 150 years ago, the population in the Phoenix Valley was like, what, under 10,000? And the Salt River, which is actually fresh, I don't know why they call it the Salt River. So you had like melon farms and, it's like a oasis along that river with 10,000 people living there. Now there's millions. And the water comes from hundreds of miles away. It's essentially an artificial environment. It's one of the first things I always say to people: where does your water come from? If they don't know, it's like you got night vision goggles, you got like 5 rifles, right? But if your water tap goes dry, you're
Not going to do you.
a refugee in a week.
It's not going to do you a lot of good with I don't care what kind of goggles you have or how many guns.
Right. You're in a week, you're in the same struggle with everybody else. So you got to be somewhere like, where does your water come from? Where does your food come from? How much food do they grow in your zip code? How much food do they grow in your area code?
I love when people say to me, because I say, yeah, my plan is to go back to Ohio, and they're like, oh, the winter. I'm like, yeah, I want to live where there's water. That's kind of appealing to me. They go, well, that's why I have a house in Sholo, Arizona. I'm like, okay. like
Yeah, solo pine top. But they,
Flagstaff.
yeah, there's a reason why people fought for Ohio. Okay, it was just like a perfect climate for growing everything. Get the Indians out of the way, and we'll take care of the rest. Right? The pioneers, they knew where it was great, and Ohio was great. Whether it can sustain all the millions that live there, I don't know, but Ohio will always be great, you know, in terms of when the dust settles at whatever population is left, Ohio will still be a perfect zone for humans to live. It has all the ingredients that it needs. It might be a rough period getting from before to after, but
It's
Phoenix is like living on Mercury. You can't you can't live in Phoenix unless you're, one of the, I mean, imagine living there before air conditioning, before running water, before, the dams were built. It was like 10,000 tops.
What do you think is worse, living in Phoenix or living in like Chicago or LA or New York City?
All of the big cities are gonna melt down if there's a power outage. And the problem is,
I mean, just overall though, like with the crime, with the I say I still would put Phoenix better than like LA or San Francisco or Portland, Seattle.
but they all depend on the power, on electricity for survival.
No,
I
I know,
mean,
but just okay. But just in general, right now, if you were going to pick
but you're
someplace
assuming that the power is uninterrupted.
for now, yeah. I mean, power outage, that's a whole different story. But I'm just saying, like in terms of, I feel I would pick Phoenix over LA right now.
Probably because the social problems in LA are insurmountable, but all of these are assuming that the power continues. Our enemies all know what we know, that if you don't need to fire a nuke at LA or Dallas or New York, you do not need to do that. All you got to do is pull the plug, and these cities will nuke themselves. So this is not like top secret. If you fire a missile from China or Russia, a submarine, and it hits Chicago, in 2 seconds, everybody knows where it came from and who did it. But if commandos start just shooting power transformers, they do the same thing, and there's no direct back channel saying Iran did it, China did it, Russia did it. We won't even know. They'll probably blame it on white racist militias, right? But if the power goes out in any of these cities, it's Katrina, without floodwater. And if the power goes out in 20 cities, I don't think we can recover from it. And the problem is our enemies know this. It's not like, Matt Bracken dreamed this up, and the Russians, Chinese, Iranians, various terrorist groups, they haven't thought of it too. They all know it. So I'm always saying people who live in a glass house shouldn't go around the globe throwing bricks through other people's windows, acting like the, hegemon, like it's still it's still Reagan era. Here comes the carrier battle groups. Everybody bow down and get out of the way because Tom Cruise is coming with Top Gun, right? And they're going to blow all the MiGs out of the sky, and Uncle Sam is supreme forever. We're still coasting into that. We're still coasting in that mindset, that Ronald Reagan, Tom Cruise, Top Gun mindset. But that period is over. The Russians aren't buying it, the Chinese aren't buying it, and the Iranians aren't buying it. And we're going to get into a lot of trouble if we go to total war against Iran. It's going to drag in Russia and China. Maybe not directly, but I think China will attack Taiwan. The Russians will back Iran, and there's nothing we can do to stop them from resupplying Iran. And we're going to then get attacked in our own soil. It's not World War II where the World War happens over in the Pacific and in Europe, and here in America everything's just fine. Everybody's got their own fifth column in America now. All of our enemies have fifth columns in place. And if push comes to shove, they turn off our power, we're done. It's not a secret. This is not like nobody thought of this.
Yeah, I can't see China invading Taiwan at this point. I mean, they don't need to. They just I mean, when Michael was on over the weekend, he was talking about when he was in Kinmen, and there were people in Kinmen that would rather be part of China, and they identify with that. And if you look at China, I mean, historically, when was the last time they invaded? They don't need to do
No,
that.
but right. But China is building these what they're called barges, but it's like a floating pier. When remember we were talking about the Gaza pier, right? The Gaza pier is a floating pier that you attach to the land in Gaza, and at the other end, you think you can offload trucks and they're going to drive onto the beach. But these are just floating piers, and if the waves get too big, they break apart. Okay, what the Chinese are building are jack-up barges. So a barge comes into the beach, and then with pilings that are like hydraulically jacked up, it goes above the sea level. All right. So now this floating pier, the waves don't matter. It's on its own pilings. And the next barge comes in and connects to it with its own pilings, jacks up above the waves. China is building these to invade Taiwan. Doesn't mean they want to invade Taiwan, and it won't be easy. It will be extremely costly, but they're letting the world know we're not toothless. And if you think you're just going to like erase Iran and nothing's going to happen, you're going to cut off our oil. When you go to war with Iran, China's oil is completely cut off. An entire World War III, World War IV shitstorm is going to ensue from that. And China is building things that are a signal to the world. Don't disregard that we can do this, that we will do this. Remember, Japan never invaded anybody either. Japan was like China today. Everybody said, well, Japan, they're smart. They make like cameras and binoculars, but they don't like invade anybody. Russia got into a dispute with them over some islands near Japan in the early 1900s, like 1903 or something. And they sailed the Russian fleet, which was actually an amazing navigational feat because they had to have coal. They weren't oil burning, so you had to find coal along the way. So the Russian fleet went all the way from like northern Russia around the Atlantic, around Cape of Good Hope, all the way to Japan, and then Japan kicked their ass. Okay, so it still wasn't really Japan invading anybody per se, but people just also looked down at Japan in the 1930s. They don't have a history of invading places, and they invaded Manchuria, and it's like, well, it's out of character. And if we sanction them hard enough, we can get them to pull out of Manchuria because they went there for raw materials. If we sanction them hard enough, I'm sure they'll just pull out of Manchuria. They didn't. They did Pearl Harbor and had a world war instead because they calculated if these American sanctions stay on us for 2 years, we'll be starving. We'll be like at their mercy. So instead, they attacked Pearl Harbor and World War II in the Pacific happened. China today is not going to kowtow, knuckle under, and say, Trump, you win, give us your terms. They're not going to do it. And we're like stumbling around, making enemies. We're like pummeling the Houthis in the Red Sea to like warn Iran and other countries, but I don't think the rest of the world's buying it particularly. I'm glad that we did not go along with Netanyahu's plans to like have America be the muscle to attack Iran. I'm glad we didn't do it, but there's still like an entire minefield out in front of us.
Think the honeymoon is over for the Trump administration?
Trust the plan, Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, Dan Bongino, the arrests are coming any day. You wonder what kind of blackmail material. I mean, who is like I think it was the old Fox TV show, what was it? The X-Files. There's always like some guy with gray hair on the park bench, and he's like the keeper of all the secrets. Like, we can't tell him about this because it's just too mind-blowing. What do they what who talks to Dan Bongino and says, Dan, we just can't do that. And here's why. What secrets are there? Why do we not know who went to Epstein Island? I mean, that should have been simple.
I never bought into any of that. I didn't care who was going in. I did not. I mean, I had the same attitude. Okay, if it happens, I'll admit I'm wrong. Just like the election, I was pleasantly surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised if it occurs. But the whole notion of Cash
It's better
Patel,
than Kamala.
yeah, I guess I don't know. I mean, I think we're good. All right, I think we're going to end up in the same
Unless you're
result, Matt.
unless you're a collapsitarian accelerationist, in which case Kamala would have been better.
And let me retract my response. I did vote for Trump, and I was glad that he won. But the whole notion of you know they were going to get in and people were going to get arrested. I never, because I've heard this movie before. I've heard it for
Trust
4 years.
the plan.
Trust the
Trust the
plan.
plan. It's coming.
It was going to be RFK was going to save the day. Then it was going to be Cash Patel. Now it's Bongino, right? It's the next man up, like the Running Man or something.
Somebody I saw a post today say they brought Dan Bongino in as the deputy director of FBI because then he just can't be talking about this every day. He has to shut up. It's like a way of shutting him up. Stay in your office and shut up. No more daily hour of exposés and whistleblowing. But
Pete,
trust the plan. I'm sure it's going to be good.
so
It's like the new Q.
and what about the one I really hate is winning. Tired of winning. Tired of winning.
Yeah. I I have this discussion with my wife all the time. Why does Trump is like addicted to like saying stuff that pisses people off, right? And it's like, well, if you want the leopard, you got to have the spots, right? You can't have the leopard without it's like saying, I want the leopard, but I want it to like, have a different coloration. Trump can't help, like today, going out and calling Powell like basically a moron, right? And the 3% goes off the stock market. you know, is he a 4D genius, or is he just a bull in a china shop? We don't know.
Well, if you ask the people that are, the diehards for him, this is 4D, and we're tired of winning. But in simple terms, I mean, the system is just in my view, it's just too far gone. You cannot restore this.
Right.
The debt bomb
Right.
you cannot salvage.
Debt to GDP, it's Niagara Falls.
Gone. Our society, the divide, gone.
Right.
I mean, people are glued. Yesterday, I was at a red light turning right, and they had an arrow to go left. The guy was staring at his phone. There's a car honking behind him because he's got the arrow. He looked like a pretty young guy. The kid missed the arrow. So they just sat there through the green arrow because he was staring at his phone. He wasn't looking up.
Nobody jumped out of their car and like dragged him out and shot him or something, because that happens too. I mean, people are like on a razor edge. Here in Northeast Florida, like a couple weeks ago, a road rage incident happened where a guy like in his pickup truck blocks another car and jumps out and puts rounds through the guy's windshield. Right? He's like arrested 20 miles away 20 minutes later. But it's like, why are people on such a hair trigger? You can just go to a Starbucks or go to a McDonald's or go home, chill out, have a beer. But people are like ready to jump out of their car and start shooting. What's going to happen when they're under real stress? See, these kind of breaks that happen when things are good are like precursors or early indicators. If out of a calm sea, everything's fine, you start seeing, fish jumping, there's a battle underwater, right? Well, what's going to happen when it's not calm and the fish are all terrified? It's going to be a complete feeding frenzy.
Yeah,
But
and
I'm Mr. Black Pill, so don't pay attention to me.
well, what about when people's 401ks, as they have through this market downturn, when people, if it continues to drop and drop and drop, people are going to lose their shit. Like, in my view, I could be wrong, but people look at how they
Well,
reacted to COVID.
I don't have any way of knowing this for a fact, but you keep hearing statements from people who supposedly have done studies that, like, 60% of Americans couldn't get $500 right now to, like, do a major car repair. That's thin ice for a society to be walking on. That means a significant part of the population is like a paycheck away from homelessness, that they're barely keeping their lips above water when the water is calm. When power is working, restaurants are open, supermarkets are full. If people are that close to, like, to financial disaster, what happens when the bottom really falls out? When pensions aren't being paid? We can go into a deflationary cycle at this point, depending on the moves that are made, or an inflationary cycle. Either way, you wind up in a depression. It could be Weimar Germany hyperinflation depression or USA deflation depression. But they're both terrible. They both wipe out people. They both just destroy. But in America in the 1930s, there was still a level of social cohesion. You can say, yeah, there was Jim Crow laws, but it was stable, right? Even within the Jim Crow era, there wasn't as much social instability. All right, blacks were in this place, whites, Mexicans, but it was a stable relationship, like a binary planet. It's like a stable binary planet. Now you've got all of these external extra planets and moons coming in, and the risk of a catastrophic collision is much greater. So, if we have an economic 1929, at this point, people aren't going to wait in soup lines, right? They're not going to wait for a loaf of bread or sell apples. They're going to go nuts. We see it already.
So you're going to Ireland?
Yeah, next month. Yeah. Yeah, I'm starting to write a book about what might go on in there. But yeah, Ireland is like a bellwether. Ireland is like a real test case. And there's a school of thought that, why is this happening in Ireland? That Ireland in the 90s, up until the 2008 crash, was called the Celtic Tiger, right? All of these corporations moved to Ireland, call centers, tech firms, pharma firms. They had intelligent population, low regulation, and Ireland took off, and it was really slammed in 2008. And there's a school of thought that Ireland was basically sold. The loans. So what was the collateral for the loans that bridged Ireland and kept it going after the crash? The collateral was Ireland, and the people on the other side of the bargain are, say, the Saudis, and part of the deal is immigration. That'll be up to us now. And we don't hate Saudi Arabia. We don't hate living in the Middle East, but Ireland looks a lot nicer to us. It's green, it's lush, great climate. So we're just going to kind of move to Ireland. And since you already sold it, you can't say no. And that's the kind of a quandary that Ireland is in now, where the Irish people are waking up to the fact that they were just sold out. And they're going to say, you didn't have the right to sell the land from under us. And no matter what deal you thought was made, and what 20 and 30-year loans and bonds are in rotation and have to be renewed, or we're just going to say no, you can't have Ireland. No matter what the consequences are financially, you can't have Ireland. We are not collateral. And that's going to be a big pushback, because that Conor McGregor Tucker Carlson interview, I recommend everybody watch that. He's basically Conor McGregor, who may be the next, leader of Ireland, possibly, saying, we were sold out by traitors and it can't go on. We're going to stop it. He even said in that interview that they used to hang, draw, and quarter people for treason. I mean, he said that. Can you imagine an American politician in our context saying, we used to hang, draw, and quarter traitors, right? If that was in the context of like Biden or Mayorkas. Conor McGregor said that in the context of today's Irish political elite. We used to hang, draw, and quarter traitors. Like that's kind of fighting words from a guy that was an MMA, octagon fighter. It's not like just some librarian saying that. It's a fighter saying that. So I think that they're taking notice over there.
Are you going to hook up with Mick O'Keefe?
I don't know. I haven't met him. I don't want to really get in too much to like, who I'm seeing over there. Some of the people over there are, under the radar and.
Right. But I mean, Mick O'Keefe's big platform on social media and whatnot. It'd be cool to somehow meet up with him.
But I also don't want to, tar his image like, Matt Bracken, well-known writer of inflammatory, hyperbolic, right-wing, I don't want to put him. I'm not like a, what do you call it? What's the term? Influence grabber, click grabber. What's the term? I'm not trying to, clout. What's it? Clout influence? No, what's the term?
Cloud influence, I think, right?
Clout grabber.
Cloud influence.
I'm not trying. There's a term, a clout grabber. I'm not trying to do that. Okay. I don't want to harm Mick O'Keefe or anybody else by my appearance next to them in a picture. I wish them the best.
When I had Michael on over the weekend, he was saying that London, England is gone. Do you think Ireland, England are they in the same boat in regards? And what do you think about Spain and Italy and France?
It's interesting because when you mention Spain, the UK, and Ireland, during the conquest of Spain, which came from across the Strait of Gibraltar, invaded through there, Spain was not completely conquered. There were a few counties in the very north of Spain that remained Christian. And, that when the Bay of Biscay, the northern tier of Spain, was never conquered. And that became the foothold that the Christians still retained in Spain. And this is before the Crusades in the Middle East, like to Jerusalem. Knights and other, like Ronin, like the Japanese samurai, they came to Spain and they were reinforced. And eventually, starting in that foothold in the northern tier of Spain, they pushed the Moors all the way out of Spain, from north to south. I kind of look at Europe that way with this Islamic wave, Merkel bringing him in, just loading them through Germany into the rest of the continent, and also crossing the Med into Italy and Spain. That Ireland is like that last part of Spain today. So this wave is coming across, and you can say, Matt, but these people are behind the Muslims, or they don't care. Believe me, the Muslims don't care if like there's globalist, cosmopolitan, Zionist, whoever that are like front running this. The Muslims don't care. They'll use anybody. But the fact is, they've been on a conquest binge since Muhammad, with very few turnbacks, like in Spain. Well, what I'm seeing in Europe, and I'm writing this in an optimistic vein, this Mohammedan wave is crossing Europe. It gets to Ireland, and that's the high water line. That's when one nationality, which never had colonies, it was never out conquering people, when they say this is where it stops. It's like the high tide line. Like in World War II, Barbarossa, the Germans invade Russia. They get to the suburbs of Moscow. They get to Stalingrad, right? If you're just like plotting it on a map, from 1941 to 43, it's like Germany's definitely going to win. They're this close to getting to the Caspian oil fields. They're this close to conquering Moscow, severing all the rail lines across Russia. But that was the high tide line. And after that, with a lot of American help, the Red Army pushed them all the way back to Berlin. So in my concept, this Islamic wave is sweeping across Europe. By the time of what I'm writing about in Ireland, already in the UK, cities like Manchester and Birmingham, their city councils are entirely Muslim. It's like everybody in the city council is Muslim. If you're a white Christian living in Birmingham, God help you. I think within 5 years, you'll see signs in Europe, in English cities saying, this is a Sharia zone. Women must be veiled. Must. It'll be a sign. And there will be no English that dares just like attack that sign or take that sign down. It will be like, whatever we have to do to maintain the peace. That's going to, so the backdrop of what I'm writing is, this is already sweeping across the UK. UK is in chaos, like a civil war, Sharia zones in the major cities, like signs, announced signs. You may not get on public transportation if you're a woman and you're not veiled, right? No outdoor music. This will be in UK, in the novel I'm writing, and it's looking very bad in Ireland, but that's where the high tide line is reached, like suburbs of Moscow, Stalingrad, then pushing back. So I'm an optimist, It gets to Ireland, and that's where it goes the other way. But
Are you going anywhere else on this trip or just Ireland and back?
just Ireland and back. Yep. I'm glad. I mean, I would have, there was the whole COVID thing. You couldn't fly. You had to get the jab. So at least now I can just get on an airplane and go. No mask, no jab, no vaccine card.
Yeah, I'm
I
supposed
know
to.
so many people that took the vaccine just so they could go to Europe.
I remember having this. He was a chiropractor, and he had said something I thought was funny in regards to the COVID because he had come on right when they were rolling out the vaccines. He goes, you won't meet one person that said I got the vaccine for health. It was so they could go to a concert or so they could go to Europe, or they
Stay
said
in college.
but it was nothing
Right.
health related.
No, it was a complete, and we're just finding out, all of the consequences. I think if you start Googling infertility crisis, okay, there's a wave of like the myocarditis, soccer players dropping dead on the field and all of that. That was like a more initial wave, but you're more and more going to start hearing about infertility crisis. What happened to the women's eggs? What happened to the men's sperm? Something happened, and now all of a sudden our fertility is like,
There's a runner that I follow, and she was having all kinds of health issues. She thought it was autoimmune, and I'm assuming she got the vaccine because she was promoted by CVS for encouraging it. She has a pretty big
great.
audience on Instagram, and she
Yeah.
announced that
How's Justin Bieber? How's Justin Bieber doing?
she's got Crohn's.
Yeah, it's
So,
terrible.
but yeah, people were literally. I mean, I don't know how many people I even would come
But these are
across.
the, but this is the, these immediate visible consequences are like the tip of the iceberg. The iceberg is going to be infertility. It's going to be, how come
Cancers.
women aren't having any babies anymore?
Can,
Why all the stillbirths and just failed pregnancies? Just nobody's getting pregnant.
what about the turbo cancers that they're talking about that've been spiking up?
Right. And like soccer players dying of heart attacks on the field, these are the first wave visible ones. Okay. But the big part of the iceberg is going to be fertility.
Mm.
You notice if you're watching those, if you're not watching, I know lots of people still like wouldn't even understand what we're talking about. Myocarditis, what's that? Kids always had myocarditis. But turbo cancer, well, how do you know? Is there a study? How do you prove that? But when fertility just goes off a cliff like this, people are going to be saying, now, why did that happen? Is it like autism? Is it something in our food? Is it chemtrails? But it's probably a spike protein that modifies your DNA and attacks the ovaries and the testes more than anything.
A hopeful solution for a mysterious illness, right? So the YouTube people
Yeah,
that listen to this don't flag it.
right.
A,
Oh
a,
yeah,
a
that's right.
possible solution for.
I forgot about YouTube. Is YouTube still around? Yeah, I guess it is. Anyway,
What about the Panama Canal? What are you watching right now? You're watching Ireland. You're watching Europe. Is the Panama Canal something on your radar?
it 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 seems like since Hegseth, well, Michael Jans like camped out down there because it's like it's the infinity symbol, okay? Panama Canal is the infinity symbol. North, south, east, west. It's like super, super key terrain. So I get it. It's like what we've now, and they're not like being super public about this, but apparently American forces are down there heavily again. So they haven't been like a new treaty, like American Army, come on back. You know, 20 years ago, before the treaty, we had a giant Air Force base there, Howard Air Force Base, and a big naval base there, Rodman Naval Base. These were active duty Navy ships, Air Force, planes every day in and out. So that all went away after the treaty, but it seems like our footprint is coming back into our military footprint is coming back into Panama. So, and it's not like Operation Just Cause with Noriega, paratroopers. Um, this time it's agreed upon because the Panamanian government would like us there, does not want to be just run over by China. And China is like chopping down all the trees. It's important for people to understand, maybe it's a little bit esoteric, but um, the Panama Canal is completely run gravity fed by rain. So there's a big lake at the top level. When the ships go up the locks on one side, they cross Lake Gatun Lake. Then they go down the locks to the other side. That's all run by gravity. There's no water pumped. It all depends on rainfall landing on Gatun Lake, keeping it full so that they can lose a little water every time ships go through locks. If the rain stops in Panama, the Panama Canal will be useless because it won't have that full lake. If you defoliate Panama, if you chop down all the trees in the Darien Gap, if you turn that jungle into desert, okay, like happened many times in history, Greece, Lebanon, Italy, they used to be heavily forested. They chop all the trees down. Haiti for that example. You can compare Haiti to the Dominican Republic right across the line. You chop all the trees down, the rain that comes washes all of the soil away to bare rock, and then the clouds aren't there anymore. It has to do with the reflectivity of the earth. It's called albedo, ALBEDO. So you can like turn a country that was a lush jungle into a like Phoenix desert just by chopping down all the vegetation. China's doing that in Panama. They're just delogging Panama, putting these 500-year-old mahogany trees on ships to China. It's very profitable. It's it's legal, but they're defoliating Panama. If Panama is defoliated, it'll be a desert, and there'll be no Panama Canal. Maybe they'll make another canal somewhere else, but it won't be the Panama Canal. So Panamanians understand what's going on and what the long game is, and our military is back in Panama. So, yeah, and that's why Jan is there. It's like one of the big front lines for sure.
What about my last question for you? What about Greenland?
I go back to that, the board game of Risk. And if you control Greenland, we already have Alaska, right? If you control Panama, Greenland, and Alaska, which is a state, then the USA is in is a strong bunker fortified position. When we're talking about decoupling from China, if we're going to decouple from China, if you control everything from Panama to Greenland to Alaska, you have pretty much all of the natural resources you need. When people talk about rare earth minerals, they're just talking about dirt, okay? That's all it is. If you have enough, maybe it's a little bit more here or a little bit more there. Like when they say, oh, we're going to get the rare earths from Ukraine, that's bullshit. That's like, oh, we're going to mine rare earth and send it to America so we can make lithium batteries. That's bullshit. China is a rare earth power because they don't care about strip mining entire mountains to get this much, lithium lithium out of it. Or what happens in the rivers and they don't care. So anybody can get rare earth minerals if you just relax your environmental regulations enough. Like China's an industrial power because they have thousands of coal power plants, which is cheap and makes lots of power easily. We don't do that anymore. So if Greenland has rare earth minerals, I don't know, it's underneath like 1,000 feet of snow and ice, but just geographically, it gives us a very secure position. And that's another reason why Ireland is important, because Ireland, if you're looking at that risk map again, after Greenland, you got little bitty Iceland, but there's Ireland, and that's like the foothold into Europe. So Ireland has a couple of really big airfields, like in the west of Ireland, Shannon Airfield, during Global War on Terror and Gulf War I and II. Was always an important place for our transport planes. So we may want to ally with a conservative Irish government, say Conor McGregor is the prime minister or president, because Ireland gives us like a foothold, a key beachhead while we watch the rest of Europe fall apart. So it's a game of risk, but I'm for taking over Greenland. There's only like less than 100,000 people living there. You'd pay them all $1 million. I mean, give them all $1 million and say, go wherever you want. They'll take it. I mean, how do you think we got Alaska? How do you think we got, Hawaii, we just got with Marines. We just went in like bayonets. Hawaii, we got it. But we paid for the Southwest. You can say, well, yeah, but it was like at the point of a gun after they lost a war. But we did pay gold for the Southwest, Gadsden Purchase, and we paid Russia for Alaska. So it's nothing like out of the clear blue to pay for Greenland. I mean, it's an easy deal. I would make it. Give them all $500,000 or $1 million, and you can stay. You can go somewhere else. Be American citizens. I mean, the fact that Denmark is the ruler of Greenland is a total joke. It's like, oh, some Vikings were there 800 years ago, and they conquistadors planted the flag and said, I declare Greenland in the name of Denmark, which wasn't even a country then, in the name of like Greater Norway, Denmark. I planted the flag, 800 years ago. It's still ours. The people that live there, we don't care. It's Denmark. Screw that. Pay Denmark too.
Where can people find you?
Mostly on X and Gab under my own name.
Substack you're doing more on?
And yeah, and before we cut out of here, I just want to mention, and maybe I'm completely wrong.
Trust the plan. Trust the plan.
Yeah. No. Gold is flying and silver is not. Why is gold going up multiples of silver? The gold-silver ratio is now well over 100 and getting even wider. In all of history, this is a huge anomaly. Gold is flying because central banks are fearing a debt crisis and are buying all the gold that they can buy. Central banks are not down at the retail silver level buying silver. Silver is bought by people that can't afford gold in big quantities. So right now, silver is languishing, but the ratio of over 100 to 1 gold to silver, eventually everything will return to the historic mean, which is like 20 to 1, not 100 to 1. Right now, it's an anomaly because the central bankers are just hoovering up all the gold bars they can buy. But that makes silver a screaming buy right now. I mean, if you're going to buy 1 ounce of gold for $3,400, okay, or 100 ounces of silver, I would buy the silver. Eventually, that ratio comes back to, even if it's 50 to 1, that means the silver is going to advance massively against gold. It's not like they have, like the laws of physics and the laws of economics have just been overturned in the last decade. And there's no connection anymore between silver and gold. When you can trace that ratio back to like the freaking Babylonians, it's like 10 to 1, 20 to 1, 30 to 1, 15 to 1, 100 to 1 won't last. So if you're thinking about buying 1 ounce of gold, I would suggest buy 100 ounces of silver instead. Just a suggestion.
What about Bitcoin?
It's going to go to zero. Tulip bulbs. There are no Bitcoins, right? The Bitcoin is in your head. I say if you're a Bitcoin millionaire, print it out now so you can show people later. You'll still have silver and gold. You'll still have it. Okay? You will not have Bitcoin. You will have a piece of paper that your grandchildren will laugh at you when you say, I was a Bitcoin millionaire, and they will say, well, Grandpa, why didn't you buy something for it when it still had value?
Man, I always enjoy.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Trust the plan. Trust the plan.
Trust the plan.
That's going to be the headline of this podcast when I put it on Substack and everything.
It'll all be great.
I'm just going to say trust the plan. That's going to be the headline of this podcast. Trust the plan.
It'll be grand.
Tired of winning. I'm tired of winning.
Right, tired of winning. That's right. They're all those countries are crawling to me.
I look forward to our next conversation, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mic drop.